Some criminals build empires, others lose to taxes, headlights, and angry neighbors. Stay with this one because every story gets dumber than the last, and by the end, you'll wonder how these people ever scared anybody. 1. Al Capone, destroyed by paperwork. Al Capone was not some small-time crook stealing candy bars from a gas station. He was the king of Chicago's criminal underworld, a man linked to bootlegging, violence, bribery, and enough illegal money to make a bank vault sweat. And yet, after all that chaos, the thing that finally brought him down was not a shootout, a rival gang, or some dramatic movie-style betrayal. It was taxes. The government couldn't easily make the bigger charges stick, so they went after the one thing even gangsters apparently cannot escape: the IRS. In 1931, Capone was convicted of tax evasion and later sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Imagine being feared across Chicago only to get flattened by unpaid income forms. That is not a criminal downfall. That is an accounting department with a badge. 2. Ted Bundy, pulled over like a suspicious teenager. Ted Bundy spent years hiding behind charm, confidence, and a carefully polished image. But his first major arrest did not happen because of some genius criminal profiler staring at a corkboard. It happened because he acted suspicious during a traffic stop. In August 1975, police pulled him over in Utah while he was driving his Volkswagen. Inside the car, officers found items including handcuffs, rope, and a ski mask. Basically, the world's worst "nothing to see here" starter kit. Investigators later connected those items to missing women, and Bundy's carefully managed image started collapsing fast. For a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else, being caught because he drew attention to himself in a Volkswagen is painfully stupid. It is hard to look like a criminal mastermind when your downfall begins like a bad episode of Traffic Court. 3. Richard Ramirez, recognized by the neighborhood. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, terrified California in the 1980s. But his capture was not some quiet detective ambush in a dark alley. It was much more humiliating. On August 31, 1985, after his face had been spread across newspapers and television, Ramirez returned to Los Angeles and was recognized by people in East LA. He panicked, ran, tried to steal a car, and quickly discovered that an entire neighborhood can be a very effective police unit when properly motivated. Residents chased him, stopped him, and held him until police arrived. So after months of fear, the monster story ended with him being spotted like a shoplifter in aisle 5. His biggest mistake was assuming a wanted face could casually walk through a city already looking for him. Turns out, when your mugshot becomes morning news, public transportation is no longer your friend. 4. John Dillinger, betrayed by a theater and a bright orange dress. John Dillinger spent years making police look foolish. During the Great Depression, he robbed banks across the Midwest, escaped from jail more than once, and became America's most wanted criminal. Newspapers treated him almost like a movie star, while the FBI made catching him its top priority. Ironically, a trip to the movies became his final mistake. In July 1934, Dillinger visited Chicago's Biograph Theater with 2 women, one of whom was Romanian immigrant Anna Cumpănaș, better known as the Woman in Red. Facing deportation, she struck a deal with federal agents and agreed to identify Dillinger in exchange for help with her immigration case. When the movie ended, agents were waiting outside. Dillinger noticed them too late. He reached for his pistol and tried to run down an alley, but FBI agents opened fire, killing him within seconds. It's almost impossible to invent a more ironic ending. One of the most dangerous bank robbers in American history survived countless gunfights and daring escapes, only to be betrayed by a movie night and a woman whose bright dress made him impossible to miss. Meow. 5. Frank Abagnale Jr., his own confidence finally ran out. Frank Abagnale Jr. wasn't a violent criminal. He became famous by pretending to be almost everyone except himself. Before turning 21, he successfully posed as an airline pilot, a doctor, a lawyer, and even a college professor, cashing millions of dollars in forged checks across multiple countries. His greatest weapon wasn't a gun. It was confidence. Abagnale could walk into almost any office, flash a convincing smile, and make people believe he belonged there. But even the smoothest con artist eventually slips. In 1969, while hiding in France, he was recognized by a former flight attendant who remembered him from one of his earlier scams. Authorities arrested him, ending years of international fraud. It wasn't advanced forensic science or some elaborate undercover operation that caught him. It was someone who simply remembered his face. After fooling banks, airlines, hotels, and governments around the world, the man who built his career on convincing strangers ended up losing to someone's surprisingly good memory. Sometimes the smallest detail is stronger than the cleverest disguise. 6. James Whitey Bulger. A TV show gave him away for 16 years. James Whitey Bulger successfully disappeared. The notorious Boston mob boss was one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, yet he managed to live quietly under a false identity in a modest apartment in Santa Monica, California. Investigators chased thousands of leads with little success. Then, in 2011, the FBI changed strategy. Instead of focusing on Bulger himself, they launched a nationwide television campaign highlighting his longtime girlfriend, Catherine Gregg. The ad specifically targeted women, hoping someone would recognize her distinctive appearance. That gamble paid off almost immediately. A former neighbor called authorities after recognizing Gregg from the television campaign. Agents searched the apartment and arrested Bulger without a single shot being fired. Inside, they discovered more than $800,000 in cash hidden inside the walls, along with dozens of weapons. After surviving decades of gang wars and avoiding law enforcement across the country, one of America's most feared mobsters was finally undone because someone watching television recognized his girlfriend. That's a remarkably ordinary ending for such an extraordinary criminal career. 7. Robert Vesco. Escaping the law until a banana peel moment financier. Robert Vesco spent years running from American authorities after being accused of massive securities fraud during the 1970s. He fled the United States before prosecutors could bring him to trial, bouncing between countries that refused to extradite him. For decades, he managed to stay one step ahead of investigators, living comfortably while governments argued over legal jurisdiction. It looked like he had found the perfect escape plan. But his downfall didn't come from American agents. It came from ordinary life. While living in Cuba, Vesco reportedly slipped, suffered serious injuries, and required medical treatment. His health steadily declined, and he died there in 2007, never returning to the United States. Although he wasn't formally captured by American authorities, his story perfectly illustrates how some fugitives spend years avoiding police only to discover they can't outrun time, age, or simple accidents. After decades of carefully planned escapes, the man who constantly outsmarted investigators couldn't outsmart gravity. Sometimes the world's greatest getaway ends not with flashing police lights, but with one unfortunate step. 8. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, a tunnel king who couldn't hide his signal. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman became legendary for building escape tunnels. In 2015, he famously disappeared from a maximum security prison through a sophisticated tunnel equipped with lighting, ventilation, and even a motorcycle mounted on rails. The escape embarrassed Mexican authorities and made headlines around the world. But freedom didn't last long. While hiding, Guzman continued communicating with associates and even arranged meetings connected to a planned movie project about his life. Investigators combined surveillance, intercepted communications, and intelligence gathered from those contacts to narrow his location. In January 2016, Mexican Marines raided a house in Los Mochis. El Chapo tried escaping once again through tunnels connected to the city's drainage system, but this time there was nowhere left to run. He was arrested after years of believing his underground escape routes made him untouchable. The man who built an empire beneath the surface ultimately discovered that tunnels can't hide phone calls, meetings, or human ego. In the end, his greatest weakness wasn't concrete or steel. It was believing he could never be found. 9. David Berkowitz, caught because of a parking ticket. David Berkowitz, known as the Son of Sam, terrified New York City in the 1970s. Police were under enormous pressure, the city was panicking, and the case seemed almost impossible to solve. Then came the clue that sounds too ordinary to belong in a serial killer investigation: a parking ticket. Near the final shooting scene, a witness remembered seeing a man buy a car shortly after officers had issued tickets in the area. Police checked the records, found Berkowitz's vehicle, and followed the trail to Yonkers. When officers searched his car, they found evidence that helped confirm they had the right man. After all the letters, fear, and chaos, one of America's most infamous killers was brought down by illegal parking. It is almost insulting to the entire concept of criminal genius. He wanted to be remembered as a terrifying figure. Instead, part of his downfall reads like a reminder from city traffic enforcement. 10. Dennis Rader. betrayed by a floppy disk. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, avoided capture for decades while living a painfully normal public life in Wichita, Kansas. He had a job, a family, and even served as a church council president, but his ego would not let him stay quiet. Years after his crimes, he started communicating with police again, craving attention like the world's worst pen pal. Then he asked investigators whether a floppy disk could be traced. Police said no. Police. Rader believed them. That was the whole disaster. He sent a disk, and digital investigators recovered metadata from a deleted document. The information pointed to Dennis and a church connected to Rader. For a man who spent years thinking he was smarter than everyone, trusting the police to explain computer safety was a spectacularly bad decision. His capture was not just forensic work, it was customer service for arrogance. He basically called tech support, asked how not to get caught, and then followed the trap perfectly. 11. Pablo Escobar. Found because he stayed on the phone too long. Pablo Escobar was one of the most powerful drug lords in history. He had money, guards, safe houses, and enough paranoia to make every phone call feel like a military operation. And for good reason. Authorities were trying to track him, and phones were dangerous. Escobar knew this. He reportedly tried to keep calls short while hiding in Medellin. But on December 2, 1993, emotion got louder than caution. He spoke with his family, and the call lasted long enough for Colombian forces, using tracking technology, to locate him. Soon after, the search block closed in. Escobar tried to escape across rooftops, but he was shot and killed. For a man who built an empire on fear and secrecy, the ending was shockingly human. He wanted to talk to his family and stayed connected too long. The king of cocaine did not lose to a bigger cartel that day. He lost to roaming charges with consequences. 12. Ted Kaczynski, caught by his own writing style. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, spent nearly 17 years sending bombs and terrifying the United States. He lived in a remote Montana cabin and seemed almost impossible to identify. Then he demanded that newspapers publish his long manifesto. This was supposed to spread his ideas. Instead, it became the world's most disastrous writing sample. After the manifesto appeared in major newspapers, Kaczynski's brother David recognized the language, arguments, and style. That recognition helped lead the FBI to Ted's cabin, where agents arrested him in 1996. It is a strange kind of downfall. Not fingerprints, not a dramatic chase, not a hidden camera. Punctuation and personality. He wanted the country to read his thoughts. Unfortunately for him, someone who knew him read them a little too well. Most criminals leave evidence behind by accident. Kaczynski mailed the evidence to the public and basically said, "Please publish my psychological fingerprint." That is not a manifesto. That is a very long confession with footnotes. 13. Robert Durst, defeated by a hot microphone. Robert Durst spent decades surrounded by suspicion. He was linked to several deaths, gave strange interviews, and somehow kept walking through life like a rich ghost nobody could quite pin down. Then HBO's documentary The Jinx changed everything. During filming, Durst went to the bathroom while still wearing a live microphone. Believing he was alone, he muttered words that sounded devastating on tape, including the now infamous line about killing them all. The recording became one of the most shocking moments in true crime television. Durst was later arrested and eventually convicted of murdering Susan Berman. Think about that. A man spent years navigating lawyers, suspicion, media attention, and criminal investigations, only to be undone by forgetting he was still wired for sound. It was not a detective hiding in the shadows. It was audio equipment doing its job. In the end, Durst did not need an interrogation room. He accidentally interviewed himself. 14. John List, caught by a TV sculpture. John List vanished in 1971 after murdering his wife, mother, and 3 children in New Jersey. He planned the crime carefully and disappeared so effectively that he lived under a new identity for nearly 18 years. He remarried, worked as an accountant, and probably thought the past had been buried forever. Then, America's Most Wanted aired his case in 1989. The show featured an age-progressed clay bust created by forensic artist Frank Bender, showing what List might look like years later. The sculpture was frighteningly accurate. A viewer recognized him, contacted authorities, and List was arrested in Virginia less than 2 weeks after the episode aired. Imagine hiding for almost 2 decades, only to be exposed by a piece of television art. He beat wanted posters, name changes, and time itself, but not a clay head on primetime TV. It was like being defeated by the world's most serious arts and crafts project. 15. Richard Reed couldn't light his own shoe bomb. Richard Reed became known as the Shoe Bomber after attempting to destroy American Airlines Flight 63 in December 2001. He had explosives hidden in his shoes and tried to ignite them during the flight from Paris to Miami. But the plan fell apart in the most humiliating way possible. Passengers and crew noticed smoke, saw him struggling, and stopped him before he could complete the attack. Several people restrained him using whatever they had available, including belts and cords. The plane landed safely, and Reed was later sentenced to life in prison. The case changed airport security forever, which is why millions of travelers have removed their shoes at checkpoints ever since. But at the center of this global security headache was one man who could not successfully light his own footwear. It is terrifying, yes, but also absurd. He tried to bring down an aircraft and instead gave the world the most annoying airport ritual since the boarding group announcement. 16. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, tracked by his own movie dreams. After escaping from a maximum security prison through an elaborate tunnel in 2015, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman once again became the most wanted man in Mexico. He had safe houses, loyal bodyguards, and enough money to disappear almost anywhere. But success has a funny way of making people believe they're untouchable. While hiding, El Chapo became fascinated with the idea of telling his own life story. He wanted the world to hear his version of events and quietly explored the possibility of making a movie. That decision led to meetings with actress Kate Del Castillo and actor Sean Penn. Although the meeting itself didn't directly lead police to his location, investigators later confirmed that communications surrounding these contacts helped generate valuable intelligence, while authorities were already closing in. By January 2016, Mexican Marines had located his hideout in Los Mochis. The man who had escaped through one of the most sophisticated prison tunnels ever built wasn't defeated by concrete walls or prison guards. His biggest mistake was believing Hollywood could wait while he was still one of the world's most wanted fugitives. 17. Arthur Conan Doyle accidentally helped catch George Adalji's real attacker. Most people know Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as the creator of Sherlock Holmes, but few realize he played a surprising role in a real criminal investigation. In 1903, George Adalji, an English solicitor, was convicted of mutilating farm animals in a case filled with weak evidence and prejudice. Conan Doyle became convinced Adalji was innocent and personally investigated the mystery. While campaigning for Adalji's release, Doyle studied the evidence like his fictional detective would have. He concluded that the real criminal was almost certainly still free. His relentless investigation exposed serious flaws in the original case, leading to Adalji's pardon. Although the actual attacker was never formally convicted, Doyle's work forced British authorities to admit they had pursued the wrong man. It's one of history's strangest twists. The man who invented the world's greatest fictional detective ended up solving enough of a real mystery to expose a wrongful conviction. Sometimes reality borrows directly from fiction, and occasionally, fiction wins. 18. Ronnie Biggs, a vacation interview ended. His freedom, Ronnie Biggs became famous after taking part in Britain's Great Train Robbery of 1963. After escaping prison, he spent decades living abroad, mostly in Brazil, successfully avoiding extradition. He had become something of a celebrity, giving interviews and enjoying the strange fame that followed one of history's biggest robberies. But age and poor health slowly changed his priorities. In 2001, Biggs made a decision that stunned everyone. He voluntarily returned to Britain, saying he wanted to spend his remaining years at home. Police were waiting when his plane landed, and he was immediately arrested to complete the prison sentence he had escaped decades earlier. After spending almost 40 years successfully avoiding authorities across continents, the man ultimately surrendered because he missed home. It's probably the only international fugitive story that ends with homesickness. He outran detectives, governments, and extradition treaties, but nostalgia turned out to be far more powerful than handcuffs. 19. Charles Ponzi, exposed, because the numbers never added up. Charles Ponzi became one of the most famous fraudsters in history after promising investors extraordinary profits through international postal reply coupons in 1920. Thousands of people rushed to hand him their savings, convinced they had discovered a financial genius. The problem was simple. The business model never actually worked. Instead of generating profits, Ponzi used money from new investors to pay earlier ones. At first, the illusion looked convincing. Then journalists started asking uncomfortable questions. One newspaper calculated how many postal coupons Ponzi would have needed to buy in order for his business claims to be true. The answer was so absurd that it would have required more coupons than existed in circulation worldwide. That calculation shattered the illusion almost overnight. Investigators quickly confirmed the fraud, and Ponzi was arrested. His scheme became so famous that every similar fraud ever since carries his name. Imagine becoming immortal because basic arithmetic refused to cooperate with your lies. 20. Jesse James, killed by someone he trusted. Jesse James spent years becoming the most famous outlaw in America. He robbed banks, trains, and stagecoaches while creating an image that blurred the line between criminal and folk hero. Lawmen chased him across several states without success. In the end, none of them caught him. Instead, his own gang did. By 1882, James had become increasingly suspicious and paranoid, constantly worrying about betrayal. Ironically, he invited the Ford brothers, Bob and Charlie, into his home because he believed they were loyal. On April 3rd, Jesse James turned his back to dust a picture hanging on the wall. Bob Ford seized the opportunity and shot him in the back of the head, collecting the government reward. It's one of history's most famous betrayals. Jesse James survived countless robberies, posses, and gunfights, only to be killed inside his own living room by someone eating at his table. Sometimes the most dangerous place isn't the battlefield. It's your own circle of friends. 21. Bernie Madoff, a simple confession. Ended the biggest fraud in Wall Street history. For decades, Bernie Madoff convinced investors that he possessed an almost magical ability to produce steady profits regardless of what happened in the stock market. Billionaires, charities, celebrities, and ordinary families trusted him with billions of dollars. Behind the scenes, there was no brilliant investment strategy. It was simply one enormous Ponzi scheme, constantly using new money to pay existing investors. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, too many clients wanted their money back at the same time. The illusion collapsed overnight. Realizing there was no escape, Madoff confessed everything, not to the FBI, but to his two sons. Shocked by what they had heard, they immediately contacted federal authorities. The next morning, agents arrested him. After fooling regulators, auditors, banks, and some of the world's smartest investors for decades, the biggest financial criminal of his generation was ultimately brought down by telling the truth to the wrong audience. It's perhaps the greatest irony in financial history. Honesty lasted only a few minutes, but it ended a fraud worth billions. 22. Jordan Belfort, the wolf who couldn't outrun the paper trail. Jordan Belfort built his reputation on selling dreams that rarely existed. As the head of Stratton Oakmont, he turned stock manipulation into an art form, convincing thousands of investors to pour money into worthless companies while he lived a life filled with yachts, helicopters, and extravagant parties. For a while, it looked like he had discovered the perfect system. But Wall Street has one enemy that never gets tired: documentation. Investigators from the SEC and the FBI slowly pieced together years of trading records, financial transfers, and witness testimony. Unlike a bank robber who leaves fingerprints, Belfort left thousands of pages of paperwork. Every fraudulent deal created another trail for investigators to follow. Eventually, former associates began cooperating with prosecutors, making the case even stronger. Belfort pleaded guilty to securities fraud and money laundering in 1999. It's almost funny when you think about it. The man who convinced thousands of people to ignore the fine print was ultimately destroyed by paperwork. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon in law enforcement isn't a gun. It's an accountant with unlimited filing cabinets. 23. Frank Lucas, a seatbelt. Started the investigation. Frank Lucas became one of New York City's most notorious heroin traffickers during the 1970s. He built a criminal empire worth millions and was famous for living a lavish lifestyle while trying to stay beneath the radar of federal agents. Yet one seemingly insignificant decision attracted exactly the attention he didn't want. According to investigators, Lucas was once stopped for a routine traffic violation involving a seatbelt. While the traffic stop itself didn't immediately bring down his organization, it contributed to investigators identifying him and gathering information that eventually supported their much larger case. From there, detectives continued following financial records, surveillance, and witness testimony until the empire began collapsing. Lucas was eventually convicted on federal drug charges in 1976. For someone moving millions of dollars through sophisticated criminal networks, It's incredible that something as ordinary as traffic enforcement helped place him on law enforcement's radar. Criminal masterminds spend fortunes planning escapes, secret meetings, and hidden cash. Sometimes all it takes is a police officer noticing you're not wearing your seatbelt. 24. Boston, George Young. Arrested because he never stopped smuggling. George Young made millions transporting cocaine into the United States during the height of the Medellin cartel's power. After serving time in prison, most people would probably decide they'd had enough excitement for one lifetime. Young had other ideas. Following his release, he promised to leave crime behind, but temptation proved stronger than common sense. In 1994, he became involved in another cocaine trafficking operation and was arrested once again. There was no elaborate undercover operation worthy of Hollywood. Authorities simply uncovered yet another drug shipment connected to him. The irony is impossible to ignore. After surviving years inside one of the world's most dangerous criminal organizations, escaping violent rivals, and serving prison time, he returned to exactly the same business that had already ruined his life once before. It's like touching a hot stove, getting badly burned, and deciding the stove probably changed its mind. Sometimes the stupidest mistake isn't making the wrong decision once. It's making the exact same decision twice. 25. Griselda Blanco, the queen who trusted the wrong people. Griselda Blanco earned the nickname the Cocaine Godmother for a reason. She helped build one of the most violent drug trafficking organizations in history, controlling enormous cocaine shipments between Colombia and the United States during the 1970s and 1980s. Blanco believed fear kept everyone loyal. Unfortunately for her, fear also encourages people to cooperate when facing prison themselves. Federal investigators slowly built their case through informants, intercepted communications, financial evidence, and testimony from former associates. In 1985, she was arrested in California after years of investigation. There was no dramatic final shootout worthy of an action movie. Instead, her criminal empire gradually collapsed because people inside it decided saving themselves was more important than protecting their boss. History repeats this lesson over and over. Criminal organizations often look powerful from the outside, but once arrests begin, loyalty becomes surprisingly expensive. Blanco trusted an empire built on fear, only to discover that fear changes sides remarkably fast when prosecutors start offering plea deals. 26. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. A tunnel couldn't save him. Twice, few criminals have escaped prison as spectacularly as El Chapo. His 2015 escape through a mile-long tunnel complete with lighting, ventilation, and a motorcycle instantly became legendary. It looked like something straight out of a blockbuster movie. But here's the problem with legendary escapes. They make you believe you'll always find another way out. After authorities tracked him to Los Mochis in January 2016, El Chapo once again attempted to flee through underground passages connected to the city's drainage system. This time, however, the plan failed. Mexican Marines had surrounded the area, forcing him above ground where he attempted to steal a vehicle before finally being captured. Imagine spending millions building escape routes, only to end your run by trying to carjack someone in broad daylight. That's not exactly the ending you'd expect for one of history's most powerful drug lords. His greatest strength had become his greatest weakness. He believed every tunnel led to freedom. Eventually, every tunnel simply led police closer to him. 27. James Whitey Bulger, 16 years on the run. Ended with an ice cream run, James Whitey Bulger spent 16 years hiding from one of the largest manhunts in FBI history. The ruthless Boston mob boss lived quietly in a modest apartment in Santa Monica under a fake identity while millions of Americans had no idea one of the country's most wanted fugitives lived just down the street. Then the FBI tried something different. Instead of focusing on Bulger himself, investigators launched a nationwide media campaign highlighting his longtime girlfriend, Catherine Gregg. A former neighbor recognized her from television and called the FBI. Agents quietly watched the apartment until Bulger stepped outside for what witnesses described as an ordinary daily routine. There were no explosions, no high-speed chase, and no dramatic last stand. Officers arrested the aging gangster without firing a single shot. Inside the apartment, they discovered more than $800,000 hidden inside the walls, along with dozens of firearms. After surviving decades of gang wars, assassinations, and federal investigations, one of America's most feared mob bosses was finally defeated because someone watching television recognized his girlfriend. That's a surprisingly ordinary ending for an extraordinary criminal career. Turns out, the world's most dangerous criminals often weren't defeated by genius detectives. They were defeated by their own unbelievably dumb mistakes. Which capture was the most ridiculous? Let me know in the comments.